knows this. All right. Should I look in the camera or look at you?
Well, hi, it's Jerry. It's Wednesday, April 22nd. Just look in your camera. And we're talking with Councilmember Meagan Harmon. Now, that's the beauty of live Zoom meeting.
I love it. Hopefully by the end of this, I'll get a little better at it.
There's no artifice to this whatsoever. We're all just doing our best. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. How's everybody in your house? Everybody healthy?
Yeah, you know what? We're doing okay, and we're all healthy, and it's tough, especially with a toddler, but it's definitely not something to take for granted that we have our health. So really leaning in hard into that. What's
the toughest part about having the toddler? Just that you're there during the day?
Yeah, I mean, the toughest part is when she accidentally vomits on my newly dry cleaned suit, as I'm walking out the door. But
really? Did that happen?
Yeah, last week. But you know what? She's been awesome. She's so resilient. And
what are you feeding her? What are you feeding her that she's vomiting?
Whatever she wants, whatever she can, whatever I can give her to just have her be quiet during my Zoom calls.
All right. So let's talk about what's going on at City Hall. So yesterday you had a meeting, pretty much run-of-the-mill, ordinary meeting.
It was very low key.
Your head and Mr. Jordan's head both exploded on the Community Development Department. Two of the mayor's allies were outraged at her over her new task force. State Street property owners hung up on her on that. Oh yeah, we have a $30 million revenue shortfall because of the pandemic, and the poor economic development manager walks into his first meeting and says, "What have I done? Why am I here?"
Summary.
That's pretty much it. So look, here's what I think. Here's my take. There's three streams of controversy going on here. We have obviously the emergency of the pandemic, both from a public health and a fiscal perspective. We have this chronic problem of, what are we going to do with our economy? What are we going to do with State Street? And then they run together. So we now have this acute problem. How are we going to recover and reinvent ourselves economically? Do you agree with that analysis?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, last time I was on your show and we were talking about the challenges that State Street and our economic vitality in the city of Santa Barbara in general we're facing, it was a big part of our conversation. How do we do better? How do we move the ball with regard to reinvigorating our downtown economy in particular? Well, that situation has only been exacerbated. I mean, to say the absolute very least, we are in, as you know, as all your viewers know, absolutely unprecedented times. So the challenges that existed 6 months ago, a year ago, I mean, they're magnified to an extreme that I don't think, well, nobody predicted. Certainly I didn't predict. But I really believe, and it's difficult, I think, for me to even express that there may be some silver lining because so many people are facing so much pain and dealing with so much anxiety, not only with regards to their physical health, but also to their own personal economic circumstances. So I do want to just hold space for that, while I also say this is a moment for us to figure out what we want our city to be, to think about what our economy should look like in the city of Santa Barbara and how to rebuild it, but to do so in a way that is sustainable and perhaps more diversified than it existed 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, or more.
All right, so let's break some of this down. You were concerned, and Councilman Mike Jordan was very concerned about the failure of the Community Development Department or the Planning Department to come forward with these amendments to the average unit size density program, the AUD, that would enable us to kind of jumpstart or at least speed up housing construction downtown. What's the holdup?
Well, that's a bit of a complicated question, so I'm going to try to break it down as best I can. And I will just start by saying Councilmember Jordan and I are really in lockstep on this issue in particular. I mean, we have different communication styles, but we both, I think you could sense our frustration and our commitment to getting this done.
Yes, we could sense your frustration.
That's the polite way of putting it, I guess. No, so why the holdup? Well, it's complicated. And I do think that that is a
I'm trying to
reality.
make it simple for me. Okay.
No, I mean, doing this work, thinking about housing policy and how to make adjustments to densities, to this program so that it quote unquote pencils out. I mean, I hate that phrase. It's become my least liked phrase ever since joining council, but it's not easy to do housing policy. And I by no means meant to imply yesterday, nor do I believe that it's a simple task. But the truth is we've been talking about it
Been talking about it forever.
a long, long time. And to the extent that there are pieces that require just word changes or are perhaps less work intensive, I think there's just simply no justification for further delays. And I appreciate the efforts that staff has undertaken to do it more quickly, but that's just simply not an answer anymore. And I think we need to respond to the times in which we live. And it's just
So did you get an answer
urgent.
that you're gonna be able to see this in a timely manner?
Watch this space is really what I would say. I'm very happy that it's coming back next week. We have an agendized conversation about what an expedited timeline for the downtown housing amendments. That's what it is to me. There are a whole.
This is your district, District 6.
It is, yeah. But it's important to all of us. And I really believe we can, I bet we'll get into this a little bit more later, but one of the highest and best functions of city government in particular in the context of a crisis is for us to set the regulatory landscape to facilitate successful business development when that crisis abates. And that's what we have to be doing right now. That's what my energy is focused on. And that's what sort of drove my passion in connection with these downtown housing amendments. We have to set the stage to get recovery going. That's our job. I mean, we can't, look, I love the activities under the underpass. I love that stuff. I love the picnics on State Street, and that is community building, and we need that, and we will keep pushing that. But when we're talking about a pandemic and recovery from something this extreme, that side, that's not going to do the trick. And it hasn't done the trick in the last year. So we really have to take a good, hard look at the regulatory landscape that we're putting out there. And that's the work we can do for people. And that's the work I'm committed to doing.
And then, in a related but separate, mildly separate issue, there's this whole question of the NOVAC, the audit of the community development. And I know that's been a frustration of yours, trying to get straight answers about what's going on over in that labyrinth of Byzantine bureaucratic sloth. But
how do you really feel about it?
But I mean, now they're saying, well, yeah, we kind of missed a deadline on that too. I mean, were you at all pleased with their presentation yesterday?
I mean, I don't know. How did my face look? No, I don't. Look, I have a lot of grace, as I think we all do, for the challenges that have come with this new work from home, can't interact with people situation that we find ourselves. So I do believe some flexibility is warranted. And I know that with regard to Garden Street in particular, they have worked so hard to try to convert a lot of these systems and processes to online systems. I think it's important we give them credit for that. But with regard to the study in particular, I mean, Mike Jordan was very clear, and I really agree with him. Doesn't exactly make sense why this study is delayed.
What is going to change?
Yeah.
And this is now lagging the budget. And this is something, is it not, that the council wanted to have information about, be informed about, to proceed with the budget? No?
Yeah, definitely. But I will say, and I think this is just another reality in which we find ourselves, there's going to be ongoing conversations about budget allocations. Did I want that study before we had the initial conversation about community development? Yes. Did I say that yesterday? Yes. But it's not the end of the road. I mean, it's clear we're going to have regular conversations as more information comes in about just the status of the budget. So I know we will be able to have that really fulsome discussion. I had hoped it would be mid-May. It may end up being a bit later, but
All right,
it's going to happen.
let me just cut to the chase with this. Does this not convince you that we need a change in leadership over on Garden Street at the Community Development Office?
I think it's my job to show leadership. Uh, Honestly, it is my job to push the policies that I want to see. So I think that it would.
So you're happy with the status quo over there?
No, but you see me pushing to make the changes that I want to see, pushing the AUD, talking about getting this study in a timely manner, pushing where I can, and really talking about regulatory reforms and actually seeing them through to fruition. But I don't want to score cheap political points in the midst of a pandemic. I mean, I was elected
I mean, it's a serious question. I mean, as a policymaker, what is the limit of your patience with the bureaucracy that is not responsive?
That is a good question, but until I feel that I have utilized all the tools available to me and pressed every lever available to me, I'm not willing to call for heads to roll. That's really not my job. My job is to say, this is the policy I want to see, and here's how we're going to get there and make it happen. And it's on me and my colleagues to show that leadership. And frankly, at the end of the day, you know, I don't hire and fire. So to the extent that that just department needs to see changes, that's not within my purview. My purview is to say, here's what I want to see, get it done. And I'm really proud to say that's what we did yesterday.
All right, let me ask you this. So the mayor announces formation of a, I guess, business recovery task force. BAT. As, as she would have it. And surprisingly, two of her allies, two of your colleagues, Oscar and Alejandra Gutierrez, respectively, not happy with the way that was put together. Are you on the task force?
No, I'm not on the task force. There are no council members that are going to be formally included. So it's been made very clear that our input is obviously welcome and encouraged, and that we can be part of that conversation behind the scenes. But in terms of the BAT and its composition, I think folks came down on the side of just keeping it to the mayor and the team that we saw announced yesterday.
So do you agree or disagree with Oscar and Alejandra that the makeup and the process by which that task force was put together is inadequate?
So I'll say I didn't have the same reaction that they did to this task force. But to the extent that any of our residents or my colleagues feel that their voices weren't adequately or are not adequately represented, then I think that's something to take really seriously. I think the mayor did take that very seriously yesterday. We heard her say that, you know, the suggestions will be taken on and included in this task force. That's a good thing. I think they spoke with a lot of passion and energy about this, and are really looking to represent their neighborhoods in particular. And I think that's a great thing.
Well, as it's currently made up, do you believe that the task force is in fact representative, broad, and focused enough to do the job that it's going to be tasked with?
Well, to me, I think the most important job we can do, I'm going to be a broken record on this. I truly believe that the most important job we can do is to look at our regulatory frameworks and figure out where we can have fixes, where we can implement changes, whether, you know, big or small, to say, here's where we're making it easier for you. So that's what I think will be the most efficient and effective to serving our economic recovery efforts. That is the plane on which I am doing most of my work. So that's really where my focus is. As to whether this team is perfectly representative, it's 20 people is never going to encompass the breadth of diverse interests we have in the city of Santa Barbara. I think that comments were made yesterday that made clear certain sectors need to have better representation, property owners being one of them. I think those comments were heard loud and clear. I look forward to seeing, you know, the final list of folks involved.
Yeah, and let's talk about the property owners a little bit because Dick Birdie, Richard Birdie, Jim Nell, very influential, important stakeholders in this process. If you want to talk about State Street, I mean, there was no sign of any of that. I mean, what in the world was the mayor thinking?
Look, I wasn't involved in the formation of this, so I can't really give any insight into the genesis of that list.
But you
But
agree, don't you, that perspective needs to be on any task force that's talking about recovery and specifically about State Street?
that perspective absolutely needs to be included. I 100% believe that their voices will be included and represented, that their feedback will be taken very seriously and will be central to the discussion. Whether or not, they are formally named or whether they come and are participating in the public side of this process, I have every confidence that they will be included? Yes, absolutely. And should they be? Yes.
All right. Now, the $30 million at this point of estimated revenue loss, both in the current fiscal year that ends June 30th and then the following fiscal year, does that seem like a low ball to you?
I truly don't know. I sort of have these waves where some minutes I think, oh my gosh, that is so nowhere near the pain that we're going to be feeling, and then the next minute I say, I think we're going to be okay. So I think we're all in that boat where there's so many things that we don't know, so much that we can't yet predict. I mean, if the economy opens back up in 6 weeks versus 12 weeks versus 18 weeks, we will be in such utterly different contexts that it's really hard to be in this moment and try to make any prediction that has any sort of grounding in reality. There's also the other piece that we're seeing a lot of folks say that to the extent we can open up, next month or in June, be prepared for a second wave shutdown. And I don't know to what extent that will hurt our economy. Maybe we'll be better prepared at that point and it will have less of an impact. Maybe it'll be 100 times worse. I think the only clarity I have is that there's no clarity. And I think that's part of why you're seeing the passion at City Hall that you're seeing. I mean, it's a very difficult moment and we don't have a lot of answers. Regardless, if 30 million is, where we end up, that's a huge, huge, huge hit, not something to be taken lightly. So it keeps me up at night worrying that it's going to be significantly more, how we're going to hold it all together. But we have so many dedicated people who are working so hard to piece it all together. And I really believe that has been made so clear to me through this. And regardless of whether folks are disillusioned with a certain department people really are working hard and they have real servants' hearts. And that part has been very gratifying to see.
Well, and I know, that Paul Casey, the city administrator, said yesterday he didn't want to negotiate in public, and this is all going to be involved with negotiations, conversations with the unions. But just in broad strokes, give us your perspective on what is this going to mean? Is it going to mean furloughs, layoffs? Is it going to mean pay cuts for everybody? What kind of reductions of services are we looking at? Give me a frame for thinking about that.
Well, he's right. A lot of people have come to me and said, look at what Tesla's done. Why can't you do the same kind of changes? Private companies operate far differently than government. And to the extent that negotiations need to happen, you cannot unilaterally impose changes. And I think that's a really important piece for people to understand. It's something that I didn't really understand, frankly, before taking this role on and sort of understanding the way that these different systems work together. But to your question directly, I think everything is on the table, truly. I know for me personally, just speaking for myself, I would be absolutely devastated to see further furloughs. That is something I really will do everything in my power to avoid. I imagine all my colleagues feel that way. But there is one bright spot in all this, and that's that we've worked so hard to build up our reserves over the last 10 years, really since the 2008 recession. And it's interesting because since I've taken this job, a lot of people have come to me and said, oh, our reserves are too high. And it's true. We do have a higher percentage of reserves than most other cities in the state of California, in fact. But to me, I'm now saying, wow, that was some real foresight.
That's not anywhere near even the 30 million, is it?
No, it is. I think it's about 32.
But below the iceberg piece of this, of course, is that all of our investment funds in the pensions of current and former city employees are in the toilet as well. So that's going to be another thing that you're going to have to make up.
Absolutely. And, to the extent that we could say, well, let's just use 100% of our reserves to cover this 30 million. That's not feasible either. You can't have zero reserves. And like you say, there is this compounding effect. When CalPERS is subject to market crashes, we can't really gain it all back just when we see one influx. It's got this, the money over time impacts are really severe. And we were already looking down the barrel of some real challenging times with regard to our contributions into the pension funds, our unfunded liabilities, and that, if anything, is only going to get worse. So we're going to have to address that. I mean, service cuts, Mr. Casey said this yesterday, that's a very, very difficult series of conversations to have. But I think it's inevitable that we have them.
Now, a couple of years ago, the whole city council, and it was before your time, but went out.
I'll blame them. And
campaigned for Measure C, the sales tax increase, and swore up and down, this is only going to go to infrastructure. It's going to fix our streets, fix our roads. When you say everything's on the table, is that Measure C money on the table as well?
So I was not part of that Measure C campaign. So I don't have the same sensitivities. I think that maybe everyone who was really working hard to get that passed has, but I've done a lot of research to try to understand what exactly was passed, how the process came about, and everything is on the table, but boy, does that have to be a last resort. I'm not going to tell you right here, right now, that we absolutely never would. I mean, legally, I think we do have some capacity to do so. But even as someone who was not directly involved in that campaign, just the work I've done, even in the last 6 weeks, to try to understand the feeling and the sentiment around it, people really, I think, would feel that the wool was pulled over their eyes a little bit if we went that direction. So it is the absolute last resort. And I think my colleagues feel that way too. I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but most people yesterday.
So you would approve layoffs before you would approve putting the Measure C money into the operating funds?
That's going to be such a context-specific question, and I'm not trying to dodge it, but I really don't. I know, I can see in your eyes, you're like, that's an artful dodge. No, it wasn't artful, and it's not a dodge.
Context-specific question. Here's the headline, Meagan. Yeah, I'm set.
No, but it's true, and so many of these questions, and I think I so relate to the frustration that people feel when they say, I don't know. I think we would have to be in a place that was so dire to get to the binary choice of layoffs or Measure C would just be such the situation would be so extreme, and it's extreme now, but I don't think we're there. We're not at a place where we would have to even consider making such a binary choice. So I don't think it's really useful to speculate on which choice someone would make. It's just a false dichotomy. We're not there. And to the extent that we see ourselves moving there, I would hope that we would be prepared and have really thorough conversations about either option so the community understands why and how we've ended up there.
All right. Let me go back to something you said earlier. Do you think that the social distancing model that we're being forced to use, and you having these virtual meetings and so on and so forth, do you think that is making things notably more difficult at City Hall in terms of relationships and dealing with people. And I don't mean just the technology piece of it. I mean the interpersonal parts of it.
I do. I absolutely do. Well, there's two pieces to it. What is contributing to this new forthrightness that we've all undertaken? I like that better than tension. Part of it is that we are all super committed and we all understand the absolute profundity of the moment. And I think that's what you're hearing in our passion and in our willingness to just lay it out there and what we want to see. But to the extent that there's sometimes some miscommunication, yeah, this virtual world, I think I've shared this with you before. I really don't, I find it quite difficult. I'm someone that puts a lot of stock in being able to sort of look down the line and get a sense, even if my read is wrong, and it has been, but to try to gauge where people are and use their body language and use those nonverbal cues to bring people with me or to try to figure out exactly where things are going to go and to not have that piece, I think for everyone is really difficult. And to have our communications mediated through virtual technology, it's just, it's hard and we're adjusting. And so to combine that with the intensity with which we all care about these issues and want to do a good job, I think it's tough, it's hard, but we're doing it. And I'm proud of us. I'm proud of the work we're doing to have real, honest, substantive conversations.
Let me ask you about another thing to do with downtown, and that is the historic landmarks decision, or I guess opinion, that we're looking for from the city attorney's office, which will also be part of what you like to call a regulatory framework for downtown.
It's called the Regulatory Reform Act. This is what I've termed it.
Where is that? Is he too busy getting beat up in court to get that churned out, or what's going on?
No, he announced, our city attorney announced yesterday, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date. I'll get back to you on it, but it's going in front of the HLC, I think this month or in a week or 2 weeks, very soon. So once that happens, the ball is rolling and it'll come to us. It is finalized. I mean, it's going and we're doing it and it's there. It's not, it's scheduled, in fact, if I remember correctly. So it's not a TBD, we think it's in May. It is, in fact, scheduled, which is a huge step. And that indicates that it really is, you know, I hesitate to say done, obviously, because that committee and our council can give input, but it is at a level at which they're ready for that final input. So that's a very good thing. But I do believe, sorry?
Go ahead, finish.
Oh, just, that's a really important piece to me in terms of economic recovery and what we can do to facilitate that from a regulatory point of view. The objective design standards is equally, if not more important. Those standards will allow developers to make use of existing state law and to do so in a way that reflects the character of our community. So that's what I'm really pushing. This is going to be another piece of our conversation on Tuesday. I hope it will be, about exactly when we can expect that, because that's something that will allow developers to just know what they have to do. You know, there's not really a lot of question marks. It's got to look like X, or it has to have Y included, and then you can use SB 50 and get your density or whatever that looks like. So that's a really important piece, and that's going to increase certainty and allow developers to make use of low interest rates and to really just move forward and develop downtown in a way that is responsive to what our community wants, which is to maintain the character of who we are and what our city looks like.
Former Mayor Hal Conklin today is meeting with a number of these State Street property owners, commercial real estate guys that we talked about earlier. Are you part of that process?
I am not involved in his group, but I love it. I think the more people getting together virtually, I think I'm assuming they're doing it virtually, sharing their ideas, thinking about tangible opportunities for us to provide a better environment for business to flourish in this city. That's all to the good, because it is an all hands on deck moment. I hope and expect that the former mayor will engage with the BAT and, provide sort of the insight into his conversations, and that it'll be a really connected effort, because we are a connected community, and we got to work not at cross purposes, but on parallel tracks. That's how I see it.
I've heard that several members of that group have come to you and asked you to run for mayor. Is that true?
No, I don't think people ask people to run for mayor.
Urge you to run for mayor. They've been urging you to run for mayor. Is that wrong?
You know what? I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be on council right now, and I still have so much to learn. And this role for me is it's just such an awesome opportunity, and especially in light of this pandemic, there's some real work for council members to do, and that's 100% where my mind and heart is.
So are you ruling out running for mayor next year?
Yes.
100% absolute, categorically ruling it out.
Jerry, what is this? This is like a gotcha question.
Oh,
yes, I don't. Look,
it's the question you always ask someone.
I know. And then the moment someone says, well, never say never, it's like Meagan said she wouldn't rule it out. No, I'm ruling it out. Absolutely not.
Okay.
I have so much that I want to accomplish in this role, really. And I have a toddler, so it's kind of like, let's be real. And we're a good team right now. There's a lot of folks.
Well, you could see that yesterday. Everybody, it was one team, all pulling in the same direction.
Don't you think though? Okay, here's the thing. I don't believe just because we have moments of disagreement or, some back and forth that means we're not a team. I would be more worried if everyone just turned on their light and said, yeah, awesome job, good work, thanks. I feel so heartened by the fact that we have such intense engagement, and folks are actually trying to move beyond buzzwords and just sort of the general bureaucracy speak to get to the real issues that matter to them. That's how we get to good outcomes. It's not 100% agreeing every day. It's not always having the easiest conversations. It's having the hard conversations and still respecting one another when we walk out of our offices and we turn off our Zoom cameras. And that is what's happening on this council.
All right, real quick. What's your first takeaway on the new economic development manual? You had to feel bad for the guy yesterday wandering into that.
I did.
Swamp.
The poor guy, I know. And I had a little bit of a vent session I won't say with him, at him. So he probably is thinking, wow, this is a real minefield here. No, he's very smart. He's extremely well educated. He comes with a lot of experience. It is tough, and I really want to encourage our city not to expect him to be the panacea. He is a person, and it is his sole job to work with the stakeholders and to facilitate that. But look, he's not the second coming of Christ. He's an individual.
He's on the spot. He's on the spot right now, even much more than he would have been.
It's true. It's absolutely true. But our job, my job, is to bring him the ideas and the tools he needs to be successful. I'm committed to doing that. And he has every tool to be successful. I just want to caution people from expecting him to really be the cure for our downtown. The cure is going to come from us. It's going to come from council. It's going to come from business leaders continuing to step up, continuing to engage. That's how we get where we want to go. He's going to devote all his time to it, and he's going to be a huge, huge help. But he alone cannot do it, and I think we all have to acknowledge that. But I'm grateful he's here and excited to see how he shapes this new role.
All right, Meagan, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you'll come back as the months and years of the pandemic continue. And
I can't wait till we can do this in person, but thank you so much for having me.
All right, take care.
All right, stay healthy.
You too.